But let me ask you this. Are you ready for rapid fire?
Let's do it.
So here we go. Fill in the blank. It's blank that Notre Dame is one of 10 national semifinalists for the Joe Moore Offensive Line of the Year award.
Yeah, to me, and like, where they were at the beginning of the season, the injuries, it's a complete surprise to me that they are one of the top 10 offensive lines in the country, given, what kind of the turnover that we expected between Alt and Fisher getting drafted. Your more kind of, highly touted young guys getting hurt, the mismatch that you've done kind of throughout the season. And lo and behold, they're still a top 10 offensive line at the end of the day. To me, that's a complete surprise, but it's a pleasant surprise. Like that's like opening up a gift on Christmas Day that you didn't know you wanted, but when you open it, you're like, yeah, I wanted that. That's super cool. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And the key to remembering all of this, remember back at the start of the season when they had 6 combined starts on the offensive line, who were starting on in game 1 when they went to Texas A&M. And there have been some bumps along the way. There's no doubt about that. But they're also averaging over 200 rushing yards per game. They're averaging 6 yards per carry right now. They've only allowed 12 total sacks. Now, some of the sack stuff, applies to Riley Leonard and his mobility and all that kind of stuff. But, look, there have been a lot of moving parts, because again, like think about the 6 career starts and then think about the injuries that the offensive line incurred. And there has been an upward, growth curve for this team. Who knows? Maybe those couple extra buys, even though we talked about how maybe it looked like they were shaking off some rust in the first half. I don't think Anthony Knapp had a holding call in that game, did he? Because somebody asked on We In, We Out last week if Anthony Knapp was going to have a holding call. There's no holding call. So, I mean, it's a testament to, Brent is saying fraudulent. But ND Sailor said, great credit to Joe Rudolph. And you do have to give him credit because now, even though it is still not the perfect offensive line, it is still
they find a way to get it done.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
I think they know who they are, and that's the most important. They're not trying to be someone that they're not. They figured out this is what our guys are good at. These are the things we should probably stay away from, and they've refined the things that they're really good at.
It's trending upwards. Yep. Fill in the blank. Notre Dame's loss to Northern Illinois seems like blank today.
Seems like a completely different season today. That loss feels like it happened in a completely different season today is where I'm going with this. And the reason why I say that is just offensively, they look so much better, right? Like, I still don't believe the defense played bad that game. I think they did enough that the offense should have won that game. And, you can say, yes, that they should have, got a stop on that last field goal possession, whatever. We could argue about that all day if you want. I don't agree with it. The offense should have put up enough points. But
look, even Al Golden said it,
Yeah, but he's supposed to. He's supposed to. You're not going to get up there as a D coordinator and say, it was the offense's fault. We did everything perfect, right? Like, it's just not what's going to happen at the end of the day. So what I'm getting at, though, is they just feel like more confident as an offensive unit and just more, synchronized. And I think that's the thing that they kind of, harped on coming out of that loss is, yes, while the loss sucks and, it's obviously not ideal, what this does is allows us to kind of figure out, all right, Riley Leonard, what are you good at? Not throwing the ball at the 50-yard line when you're on a possession trying to win the game, obviously, right? Like, and so it just feels night and day difference of how this offense is functioning and operating the way they did against NIU compared to where they are now. And I think that's naturally, because of a lot of things, right? Leonard is more healthy. He's more comfortable. Mike Denbrock is more healthy. He's more comfortable. There's more cohesion on the entire offense, everyone kind of knowing their role, et cetera, et cetera. But that game just feels like seasons ago, right? It doesn't even feel like we're watching the same team at this point anymore.
The Northern Illinois loss is like an ex-girlfriend who just won't go away after a bad breakup. Like she's still there. You know, it's like you're broken up, you're moving on, and then one night you're laying in bed at midnight and it's like, hey, you up? You know, and it's like, oh, it's back again, she's back again. You know, because like, you know what it means, you know where it's leading to, and you think, well, okay, I'm past all this, right? But then there she is again. It's like, you shouldn't, it's been a month, and like homecoming's coming up, right? So, like, what could it hurt? So then, your friends are like, dude, what the hell are you doing? Like, don't you remember all this? And you're like, yeah, but the good times, and it's like all the good stuff. And then they're like, no, you can't remember the good times. You have to remember the bad times. Remember the darkness. Don't forget the darkness. And then you're like, yeah, you're right. I'll remember the darkness, and then, you're like, by the way, wingman, don't let me near her when I'm drinking, because, that's just bad news. Right. So like the darkness, NIU is the darkness. And like Marcus Freeman has said, they have to keep the darkness close. They have to remember the darkness because like you said, even though it feels like it was a season ago, it's still there. It's still hovering out there. And sometimes you need your friends to remind you about that darkness, right? Like when that college football playoff show comes out tonight, I guarantee you somebody's going to bring, when they bring up Notre Dame, somebody's going to bring up Northern Illinois.
It's the first thing they're going to say.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So, like everyone remembers the darkness. They're going to keep reminding you about that ex-girlfriend that you should have ditched a long time ago, and that you just need to give the stiff arm to. So that's what it is to me.
I like that.
That may or may not be based on a true story. So from Stewart Mandel of The Athletic, this is blank. Brian Kelly left Notre Dame 3 years ago, largely because he felt being at LSU gave him a better chance at winning a national championship. But first, he's got to make a playoff, something his former school has a better shot at this season. End quote.
I always love when I get to use this word because I feel like it makes me so smart and so like hip and just all of the above. It's poetic justice is what it is at the end of the day for Brian Kelly, and him stating, largely the reason he had to leave LSU is because they give him a better shot at winning the national championship, and now the place that he left has a better shot at winning the national championship, and they're doing it in a fashion kind of rubbing it in Brian Kelly's face, because what also did he say is he can't recruit at the same level. He hit his ceiling in the recruitment, and ever since Marcus Freeman has got here, what have we seen? A total enhancement in recruits in the style of player, the explosiveness, the ability to come in and play early, like all of the. It's like Marcus Freeman put everything that Brian Kelly said on a billboard and said, "Yep, I'm gonna make sure I do that thing, that thing, that thing, and that thing." Right. So like, I love it. I think it's poetic justice. And I know it's easy to, get down on Brian Kelly and kind of rub it in his face because he makes it easy. But it's like, it's not an easy gig to be coaching at LSU. But at the end of the day, that's what he chose to do. And everything, all the consequences are on him at the end of the day.
Yeah. And when you go down there, I think it's hilarious because it's not just Notre Dame fans and Notre Dame media people,
it's everyone now
who've been paying attention. National people, are paying attention too. And when you go down there and, you're bitching about, you don't have the chef, and all this, like, all these different things that you think that you need, that's going to put it over the top. And then, okay, now you've got the chef when you go down there. Well, has the chef helped you beat any ranked teams? I don't think that it has, because Marcus Freeman is 10-4 against ranked teams since Brian Kelly left. Kelly's 4-8 against ranked teams since he's been down there at LSU. And, is he recruiting appreciably any better when he was down there? He's in a better, overall talent, hotbed type.
The landscape down there is,
but it hasn't moved the needle for him. No, it hasn't moved the needle for him. So I think it's hilarious. And again, it's not just us, who are poking Brian Kelly. It's being noticed from all over the country as well.
Well, and I think the thing that's kind of most important to touch on in this kind of discussion is Brian Kelly talks about all the time of, all the things he didn't have chefs, didn't have the pool to recruit in, didn't have maybe the facilities, yada, yada, yada. What outweighs all of that is just good coaching, good culture, and good toughness. You know, you don't need those things to be a good team.
And look, to his credit, like he did have some of that when he was here, but there were pieces of that were missing as well.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, instead of focusing on what's missing, why don't you focus on what you can do as a head coach to be better, to get your teams to not think about, because when you say those things, what are you doing? You're just presenting excuses for your players to kind of, basically allow the escape. You know what I mean? The ability to just, it's an excuse. And so if you say it, your players are going to hear it and they're going to believe it. And so to me, what outweighs all of that is just good old-fashioned coaching. And at some point, Brian Kelly's got to look in the mirror and say, am I the coach that I really think that I am? And until he does that, it's going to be a vicious cycle for him.
Well, I was going to say, I don't think that he'll ever actually come face-to-face with that. But there's this video, and I actually just found it here right now. I don't know if the volume – can you hear that?
Mm-mm.
There's like a whole, he's doing a press conference and he's going through this whole thing where, it's like, well, I don't want to blame it on this, but he's basically saying we're stuck with what we've got. We've got a lot of young players. We've got freshman running backs playing. We've got a freshman nickel playing. Well, playing young players at Notre Dame hasn't been an excuse because it's only helped accelerate what Notre Dame is doing this year, right?
Yeah.
Like you've seen nothing but young studs pop off the charts this year for Notre Dame. That's not an excuse. It's not inhibiting Marcus Freeman and his staff's ability to win. They've got a lot of young dudes here and they're all playing very well. But Brian Kelly, Brian Kelly was like the polar opposite of anyone who wanted to play young guys. He didn't trust young guys, but like Freeman and his staff have embraced young guys and specifically young, talented guys. And they're not afraid to put them out there on the field if they feel like they're ready to contribute. Again, like that's helped them. And all the stuff that you talked about, the culture and the coaching and everything else, it's proved to be, quite a bit different, I think, in the last 3 years. So the second college football playoff rankings, of course, come out tonight. Dan Wetzel from Yahoo Sports, not a fan of the weekly college football playoff rankings release. He says it's just a publicity stunt for TV ratings and the real damage that will continue to be done by having fans question and condemn various committee decisions, all of them unnecessary over the next month plus, is not worth doing the weekly release. Do you buy or sell what Wetzel's saying, Jess?
Yeah, I buy it. The only reason they do it is for more TV ratings and more money, and then it gives people something to chat about and argue about until the next rankings come out, right? So I don't think I would go completely to the degree that he's going, but what I would say is it at least gives you an insight to how the committee members are thinking. How are they ultimately getting to their end decision? That's all I care about when these, rankings come out before the final rankings. I just want to understand the thought process. What's the criteria you're going in? How are you determining kind of these tiebreakers and what can allow teams to move up and down? But outside of that, I really don't care where they are because there's so much that can happen between now and the end of the season. Those rankings are going to look completely different now than they did from the first ranking that came out. But at least we have an understanding of how they're going to get to their ranking. And so for me, that's what's worth it.
I mean, I buy it from the aspect that it's definitely a publicity stunt. I mean, obviously it's a TV show. That's what it's basically, it's not quite reality TV, but it's a TV show. And you do have to make, the committee chairman does come on and they're going to double talk from back, from week to week. 1 week they're going to tell you one thing's important. The next week they're going to tell you another thing's important. But ultimately, they're not televising the AP and the coaches poll rankings, but they're still putting out rankings, so like ultimately, if we're going to do away with rankings, you're going to have to do away with all of them, because all it is a discussion point all season long. Would I be completely disappointed if they waited until there's probably like 1 week left before the season starts and then release them? Probably not. But then, you'd just tune in. You'd have all the clamor and everything else one time. And then, the college, the conference championship games would be played. And then everyone could just bitch about who's in and who's out. So, I mean, it keeps the fans engaged. People don't want to wait that long. right? There's a lot of people who follow this sport very closely week to week, and this is one of the things. It's basically a big discussion point. Indy Sailor says he'll watch it tonight, and I've got no problem with anybody watching tonight, because if your team is in the picture, you care about it, right?
Oh,
so
100%.
Why not? Like, college football still needs something to kind of prop itself up and differentiate itself from the NFL. Like, the NFL week to week has its games, and people are going to tune in and watch those NFL games on Sundays and Mondays and Thursday nights en masse. Where, college football, people still tune in, but they're not watching them to that degree. So they need something to help, kind of continue to stir the publicity, stir the straw for college football. So why not? So where do you think Notre Dame's going to be ranked tonight, Jess?
It's funny you say that, because I am actually trying to put together something very quickly where I can share my screen.
Oh, okay.
Give me you probably can't give me much longer, but
back to I'll just talk about this. Well, Josh said this when we were talking about Brian Kelly. Josh says he doesn't think Kelly anticipated the transfer portal and NIL. Honestly, like, it is almost a different game now, because that wasn't, neither the portal nor NIL were what they are right now when Kelly decided to leave. I mean, just think about how the entire landscape has changed in that time. But LSU's a place with a lot of donors, and
they got resources.
Yeah, there's a lot of resources that flow into, there's the reason they have their chef and their facilities and all that stuff down there in 360-degree, Pulp Fiction dance and whatever else, so, like, adapt or die is what it comes down to.
Okay, I have this ready, and I think this is going to be fun because it's interactive, and who doesn't like interactive things? So let me go ahead and share my screen. There's really in my opinion, there's no, it's hard to kind of paint this picture unless you've ultimately seen it. So go ahead.
Well, I've given you time to do some extra strokes on your painting there. So let's what? Oh boy, what have we got here?
This is, you asked me for my rankings. This is the way I think about rankings now. I'm going to go through this, and if I were the committee tonight,
all I asked you is where Notre Dame is ranked. I didn't ask you for your full-blown, let's fill out a bracket. But go ahead.
No, you did. The next question. Let me
ask you this. Let me ask you this first before you get into, like, all your detail on this. How far do you think Georgia and Miami are going to fall?
I think Miami will fall out of the top 10, but it won't matter because they'd still get a top 4 with being the ACC champ.
Okay.
I think Georgia would be like right. I think Georgia would be like 10 or 11, and I think Miami would be like 12 or 13.
I've got both of them falling out of the top 12. I've got SMU overtaking. I've got SMU overtaking Miami in terms of ACC, because they've both got one loss, and I think in terms, I think that their actual wins are kind of, who they're over, kind of a wash, and SMU's loss is to a better team than who Miami lost to. Okay, so Jesse's filling it out right now. He's got Oregon number 1. He's got Texas. You can just abbreviate. He's got Texas number 2. Number 3 is
Miami.
So that means that you think that Miami, not that they're going to be ranked that high.
No.
You think that they're going to be the highest ranked ACC team, and they will take the number 3 spot when the seeding is, like, as they plot them into the bracket.
Yeah, but that has an effect, because even though you're, you're Miami and you could be like the 12th best team, you win the ACC and it doesn't matter. You still get treated like a top 3 team. So has repercussions. So my top 4, if the season ended today and I was on the, the committee doing the show tonight, I'd have Oregon 1, Texas 2, Miami 3, BYU number 4. Outside of that, I'd have Ohio State at 5. And they would be playing Boise, the group of 5 champ, at 12.
Okay.
So
and Ohio State 5, Boise 12.
And then we can get in now to where I think Notre Dame would be. and
you
that's
got him at number 8. That's where I have
8. And then after that is really where it's going to get kind of interesting, in my opinion. And so if I were the committee, I would have IU at 6. I would have Penn State. No, I would not have Penn State at 7. I would have Tennessee at 7. Tennessee at 7.
Okay.
Notre Dame at 8. And then at 9, I would go Penn State.
Okay. So that was the 7-10 game last week, and you'd have them at the 8-9 game this week.
That is correct.
Okay.
And then after that, I'm trying to it's basically just the remainder of the SEC schools who would fill in after that. And so
see, I've got Penn State higher. I can't remember. I've wrote these down. I can't remember which is Vince's column and which is mine. One of us has Penn State at number 4. The other has them at number 5. So in either case, there's a good chance that Penn State is going to drop down to the 6th seed if they're the 4 or the 5, based on Oregon, Ohio State result in the Big Ten championship game kind of thing. One of those teams might end up being the number 5.
And then after that, it would be Bama at 10 and Georgia
at 11.
So this is what my final playoff picture. If the season ended today, this is what it would look like. I'm not buying Penn State. And I think that obviously is what affects my rankings the most, because if you move them up, then that kind of changes who Notre Dame kind of ends up with. But I was talking about this a couple of days ago, and I think I was with you. I am largely in belief that Notre Dame will play a one-loss Big Ten or SEC school. Or sorry, one-loss Big Ten school or two-loss SEC team.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Well, I mean,
Notre Dame,
the playoff is going to be filled with at least 7 teams from those two conferences combined.
Yeah, and so
there's a good chance. Yeah.
At the end of the day, does that narrow it down a super ton? No, but I think Notre Dame's most likely matchups are 1-loss Penn State, 1-loss IU, 2-loss Alabama, or 2-loss Ole Miss at the end of the day. I think that's where kind of the range that they're going to be in. I don't think that there's going to be much fluctuation between this top 4 unless, Miami and BYU really do something wonky. But again, I where that puts Notre Dame for me today is 8. And then this is kind of, that again, you got Tennessee, Bama, Georgia, Ole Miss would be on the edge. It's just going to be a bunch of 2-loss SEC schools.
Yeah. And I mean, Anthony is saying that Penn State has 0 wins over ranked team benefiting from losing to Ohio State. I mean, I think with the exception of the SEC and Notre Dame, I mean, that's kind of, look at any of these teams, it's all the same thing. Who is Miami actually beaten? Who is SMU actually beaten? It's more that they lost to BYU. BYU has a win over Kansas State, ranked at the time, not doing that great right now. Again, obviously, who is IU beaten? Nobody. Who is Ohio State actually beaten? That's what it is because of the reconfiguration of all these conferences. The SEC, at least, these good teams have actually played each other, and they haven't suffered, with the exception of Tennessee losing to Arkansas, none of them have suffered what you would consider, confounding losses for the most part, because even Vanderbilt looks better now than it did a month ago, for Alabama. So it's going to be really curious. I've got, I would put both Georgia and Miami outside the top 12 with Ole Miss and SMU moving in,
okay.
Because SMU and Ole Miss were both knocking on the door. And obviously, Georgia shouldn't get any benefit of the doubt at this point, even though they have a nice win over Texas. They still have 2 losses right now, so I think that you still have to move them farther back. But, I think Anthony said that Heather Dinich was saying that the SEC is going to put in a 3-loss team. I don't think she necessarily said they will put in one. I think that she said she wouldn't be, don't rule out a 3-loss SEC team, because again, In the SEC, at least these ranked teams are playing against each other. And that's not necessarily the case for the most part in the Big Ten. Definitely not the case in the Big 12. Definitely not the case in the ACC, because they just don't have enough ranked teams out there to play against. All right. So we shall see. Rankings come out later tonight. Speaking of which, fill in the blank. It's blank that with 3 weeks to go in the regular season, the SEC has 8 teams alive and 28 SEC championship game possibilities at play.
It is a mathematician's and college football fans' dream to have this many combinations possible for the SEC championship, right? Because as a mathematician myself, I'm like, man, but this could happen, and this could happen, and this could happen, and this team could lose, and this team could win. And so, like, that's the fun of it as a mathematician. You're like, how many different actual combinations could we come up with this thing, right? And then as a fan, if you're a fan of an SEC school, you're like, we got a shot. You know what I mean? Like, this thing isn't over. We could get a top four seed. We could get a bye. Like, a lot of fans are clutching on to that hope right now. And then if you aren't a fan of the SEC, or your team isn't a part of the SEC, it's fun too, because you're like, this is absolute chaos. Like, this is 28 different ways that this season could go with a potential different outcome. And the more you see SEC teams lose, I think that's the joy that the college football fans would get, seeing more and more SEC teams lose. So that's kind of how I feel about all these different combinations.
Brent, yes, Jesse is a math major, math and engineering. So, yes, that's why his mathematical brain comes alive hearing this kind of stuff. And look, this is the system that we have now. Again, like when you look at the expanded conferences and the fact that they got rid of the divisions. All these conferences got rid of the divisions. So you don't even have, like a concentration of a few of these teams in one division, a few in the other. And, like you already have them not everybody is going to play against each other. And so the fact that you have like one long, everybody in one conference and no divisions, that's part of this as well. That's part of why you have all these teams alive, because you're taking the top 2 teams in the conference at the end of the season and plucking them into the conference championship game. That's what they wanted. And, like going back to the 3-loss thing, that's kind of what Heather Dinich, the scenario that I've heard her talking about, is more likely than not, the number 2 team in the SEC championship game is going to go in with 2 losses. And so if they lose that game, do they still have a chance to make it to the playoff? And she's saying she wouldn't rule them out in that scenario. So there's a lot of anarchy coming down the stretch here with just 3 games left. Chaptive, can't one of the other conference champs knock Miami out of the bye if there are 4 higher ranked conference champs?
I still don't think that a group of 5, Boise State, would knock off a 1-loss Miami.
Would they be ranked higher than Miami? And again, like, part of that will be answered to, talk about hanging your hat on a good win, good loss. That's basically what Boise State is hanging its hat on, is the fact that they lost to Oregon and they've won all the rest of their games. And probably a little bit of program reputation as well. But yes, in theory, group of 5 team, if they're ranked higher than Miami and win their conference championship game, Boise State as the example, yeah, they could knock Miami out of that spot. Andre was asking earlier, will Georgia and Miami be behind Notre Dame in tonight's poll? He said, if I said I believe they should, but they won't put Notre Dame ahead of those 2 schools. I think Notre Dame's going to be ahead of both of them. Don't you? I can't remember what your rankings.
Oh, Miami and Georgia?
At this point. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's 2 loss. I mean, here's the thing with Miami. Notre Dame, worst loss, but Notre Dame dominated the team that Miami lost to.
That just beat Miami more recently. Yeah.
Georgia, 2 losses. 2 losses outweigh the 1 loss. So that's kind of my rationale with that. I think the ceiling for Notre Dame tonight is 7 and the floor is 9.
I don't think they're going to be any worse than 8. I think it's 7 or 8 tonight. I understand what you're saying, kind of leaving some wiggle room. Could they still end up at 9? Yeah, I think I feel pretty
But really, there's no
about
difference
8.
in between 8 and 9 because they're just playing each other.
Yeah, it's just a matter of who's getting the home game is what
I guess
it is.
that part does matter.
That's the only difference is who's getting the home game. So actually very important to be 8 instead of 9. So out of Chicago today, the Bears got rid of offensive coordinator Shane Waldron. They failed to score a touchdown in a second straight game. Mark Silverman, who's known as Sylvie from the Sylvie and Waddle show on ESPN Radio in Chicago, tweeted this earlier today. After talking to a few people with knowledge of the situation, players went to Matt Eberflus and Ryan Poles asking them to make a change at offensive coordinator. There have also been a few veteran players requesting that Tyson Bagent starts over Caleb Williams, of course. Could things be any worse right now for the Chicago Bears, Jess?
No, and I say this, and I actually mean this. I think you are worse off to be the Bears than you are in the Cowboys right now. And unfortunately for you, that's all you watch in that house is Bears football and Cowboys football. It's like the worst of the worst. You know the part that drives me insane is look at the Chargers. 6-3. During an obvious rebuild, tear it down, bring in a new head coach, change of philosophy. 6-3. Why can't the Bears do that? Why can't the Cowboys do that? Like that's not unattainable, right? And so back to the original question, it can't get worse for the Bears because the Bears failed to just clean house at the end of the season. You knew you had 2 top 10 draft picks. Just clear everyone out. Let the new head coaching regime pick who they want. Yep. Or I don't know, if you're going to keep them, why not ensure you get a damn offensive lineman to go with your, star-studded quarterback? And so it just feels like all the Bears are doing is compounding bad decision after bad decision. And it really sucks for someone like Caleb Williams because I feel like he is a great player and he could have an impact on the Bears, but he's not getting the proper guidance, the proper, scheme, all of that above. But I'm a top-down kind of guy. This isn't an offensive coordinator, a defensive coordinator. You just need to cut ties with Eberflus, and now you've delayed that even longer.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And apparently Ryan Poles, at least the last time he talked publicly about it, says he still has confidence in Matt Eberflus. And there's no reason to have confidence in Matt Eberflus. And it really feels like things have just blown up since that debacle in Washington. Like the whole team just deflated after that Hail Mary touchdown pass.
Well, when your coach comes out and says that
and then he tries to defend his
play
strategy.
That led them to the Hail Mary wasn't important. It's like, all right, you're just Jerry Jones now, just doubling down on idiotic things that you want to say.
Yeah. And look, you talk about Washington and Ryan Poles interviewed
scenario. They got a new OC, they got a new, quarterback, new head, or I guess not a new head coach, but it's like the Commanders.
Washington has a new head coach. The Bears don't have a new head coach.
And so it's like
there's more talent in Chicago. There's more skill talent in Chicago. But you've got a rookie quarterback. You've got 2 rookie quarterbacks. And there's some irony that Caleb Williams has played against both May and Jaden Daniels just like within the last 3 weeks. And they've lost to both of those teams. They were all drafted right around each other at the top of the draft, obviously with Williams being drafted at the top. Like, it's crazy because since this stuff has come out, there was an interview that I saw from this summer with Jackson Smith and Jigba, who was a receiver in Seattle for Shane Waldron last year. And they asked him, what he thought. And he kind of he was like, and he didn't know what to say. And he's like, is this live? And they're like, yeah, this is live. And he goes, good luck. That was his response. Good luck, to Chicago after having played for Waldron last year. Ryan Poles interviewed Cliff Kingsbury, who of course coached Caleb Williams at USC last year, decided not to hire him. They hired Waldron instead. And again, there's way more talent in Chicago around Caleb Williams. They just don't have an offensive line, and they obviously don't have the, like we were talking earlier about playing to the strength of your guys. I don't think that Waldron is necessarily doing that. Like Cliff Kingsbury, he went to LSU, probably talked to Mike Denbrock, and they talked, he talked to him about what things Jaden Daniels did well, and they've played to his strengths there. That's not what they're doing with Caleb Williams. You can't just draft a guy number one and think he's magically going to turn into the savior of your franchise. You have to give him the right support. Like Washington is doing much more with less with Kingsbury and Daniels than, anything close to what Waldron was doing in Chicago with Caleb Williams.
That's the most frustrating is these front offices and GMs and stuff would rather say it's the player's fault or expect the player to be the difference rather than the coaching, the mentoring, the guidance. Like all of that stuff matters. And it goes back to Aaron Rodgers sat, Tom Brady sat, all the good quarterbacks sat. There's no more sitting and learning.
These guys are all expected to jump in and go and win
and fix everything. Just put a Band-Aid on all of it and fix everything. And it's just so unrealistic at the end of the day. And you're setting the player up for failure. You're setting the fan base up for failure because they expect those things out of the quarterback. And then when they don't perform, who are they attacking? They're attacking the player.
And look, the double-edged sword of bringing in all these veterans, the receivers they brought in and DeAndre Swift, the running back, and obviously, like having all those veterans around him, like the opposite side of this is, well, if the quarterback, needs a little more time and it's not clicking for him, well, these veterans, like the clock is ticking for them. They want to win. It's like, we want to either win here or trade me someplace else. It doesn't do them any good to have a developmental quarterback.
So Micah Parsons was kind of valid in what he said. Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah.
It's more about the players who have been tenured there longer than the coaches. And
exactly right.
And the front office people who, you're wasting Hall of Fame careers.
Speaking of which, your old boy, Jerry Jones, doubling and tripling down on the massive west-looking window that lets the sun shine in. His precious stadium is blank.
It's pure Jerry Jones stubbornness. And it's so funny because we were talking on the phone before the weekend. And this is an exact quote I told you. I said, why do we expect Jerry Jones to make changes in the roster when he can't even make a change of adding a simple curtain in his stadium because it affects his players? And then today, you know what he did? He went on and did that stupid interview that he does every Monday or Tuesday on the Fan and says, oh, well, it's an advantage. We know how to play through it. We should be able to utilize it. It's all right, Jerry. Well, how about why did CeeDee Lamb drop a wide open touchdown?
He's never made a mistake. Yeah, that's right. Dropped a wide open touchdown with the sun shining in his
But it helps your players. Your players know how to play around it. Yet they're dropping wide open touchdowns. So
and this is the thing. The fact that he built a stadium east to west, for one, explain that. Because when he was responding to this over the weekend in one of his media things, he's like, oh, we might as well tear the whole stadium down because you don't like the window. Well, it's like, it's not really like that, Jerry. It's literally.
He thinks you're attacking his precious stadium.
Yeah, because he made that decision. He will never admit
to making a
poor decision.
One, when they've hosted the WWE stuff inside of it, they've installed a curtain that drops down. Second thing,
so the wrestlers don't like sun, but it's, the football players have to suck it up. Huh?
Right. Okay. And then Mike McCarthy, I don't know if you saw this one, did his weekly press conference, and there was sun beaming in through the window. And so you know what they did?
See that.
They put a little
they put a shield up there to block the sun.
So the sun could not be in Mike McCarthy's eyes while
from the head coach in a press conference. Yeah.
So again, when Jerry Jones is too stubborn to fix a damn curtain in his stadium, what makes you think he's going to fix the roster issues, the organizational issues, the coaching issues? Like, it's not going to change because he is the most stubborn, I do it best man in the world.
That's it. That's why he sticks with his players past, the time that he should stick with a lot of them, has to overpay and, goes deep into these contract negotiations and then ends up paying over the market price they would have paid if he would have done it a year early. Yep. That's right. But here we are. Brent wanted to know if you applied to go to Cal Poly, by the way. That's where his aunt coaches now. My sister coaches basketball at Cal Poly. But no, he did not apply to go to Cal Poly. Big engineering school, math and engineering out there.
Anything that has poly or tech at the end of it is a good indication that they're good at math and engineering.
Yep.
Georgia Tech, Texas Tech.
I can't think of any. MIT. I guess it's the only other tech I can think of. All right, well, that's going to do it. We wrapped the Jerry rant early today, so
I thought the video and the lighting was tremendous on my end today. You're welcome. Fixed all of my.
It looked better.
issues.
Henry, calm down. That was good.
Just cold. Got the windows open. I need to shut them.
Beautiful fall day outside. Michigan Tech hockey power.
Right? That's all the way up there.
Yeah, it is. That's UP, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's what I thought. All right, well, have a great one. Hit the like button before you leave, if you please. We do appreciate it, as always. And we've got more shows, of course, coming up for you the rest of the week. I think Brian's got the playoff special coming up a little bit later tonight as well, after the playoff rankings come out. Talk to you later. Thanks again. IB Nation Sports Talk.